Hey, good afternoon and good morning, depending on where you're situated. Glad you could join us for a quick session on how you can use the application more effectively to present your prospects and clients to the marketplace. I'm Kevin Collins. I'm the AE practice leader here at Victor, and I'm joined by Jeanine Cole, a senior underwriter who deals with the day-to-day and a lot of these questions on each and every application and submission. So to get started, we want to kind of overview. We're going to focus on three areas that Jeanine and I feel are very important to taking ownership of the Architects and Engineers Practice Program application. There's a lot of different elements that you can go through. It's a lifetime of knowledge and challenges. But these are three areas that we really see how brokers can be more effective in delivering quality services to their clients and being the trusted advisor that you're looking to do. So over the next 30 minutes, we'll be talking a little bit about how we capture the right exposure basis based on how the firm presents their revenues and services. And then we'll talk a little bit about how we make sure that we get the applicant into the right program, because within the broader design construction community, we have a multitude of different programs specifically designed for contractors versus architects, engineers, surveyors, et cetera. And there's a key element of the application that helps to drill down quickly on that item. And then finally, risk management and internal practices are things that are sometimes difficult to have jump off the page of an application, but are super important to making sure that you're accessing both premium credits that are available in the program and how to really differentiate the firm with things that they're doing. So with that as an overview, let's really dive into the first and probably one of the more important things is how do we determine risk and exposure? And for that, Jeanine, why don't you educate our brokers a little bit and see what we can do?
Hello, I'm Jeanine Cole. I've been with Victor for about 10 years, so I've probably talked to a lot of you throughout that time. The first two slides are focusing on the billings and the services portions of the app. And we chose to do this first, mainly because this is the area that, as an underwriter, I look to first and is probably the main driver of the premium. So the first topic we're going to discuss are the reporting periods. And we get a lot of questions about the reporting periods, which ones we use for underwriting, how the firm should fill this out, what time frame these should capture. And the main takeaway here is we always look to prior year's billings for underwriting purposes, and we look to capture 12 months of their prior service year. So the application specifies fiscal year because we wanted to give the insured as much flexibility in terms of the amount of time the time frame they wanted to capture. So it could really be their fiscal year, their annual year, or past 12 months of their operations. We just want to make sure that however they report initially, that they keep reporting that same time frame going forward. So we're always doing an apples to apples type of comparison year to year. And the reason we do prior year is because since this is a claims made policy, our exposure generally lies in their past year, their past projects that they've completed. So that sort of gives us the best idea of what's out there for us, the new business or as a renewal. And then taking that down as we go through the different line items, there's a couple different breakouts here. The two that I sort of wanted to highlight are the sub-consultants piece and the direct reimbursables piece. For subs, I just want to make sure there's an understanding that we do include these billings for rating purposes. There is a vicarious liability there. If there's a sub-consultant that has an issue and there's a claim that arises, even though they may have their own coverage in place, it is likely that our insured would be brought in at least for defense purposes. So we look at these billings, we include them while we're underwriting. So it's an important line item, and they can either be broken out there or included in the total gross billings. And then conversely, direct reimbursables, we do not underwrite to. Those are items such as travel, mileage, calls, meals, those types of expenses that don't pose any exposure to us at all. So, so we don't underwrite to them. So we just want to highlight that and make sure that that number is there so we can deduct that out of their total gross billings, and then we won't include that for rating purposes. Before we move on to the next slide, just want to sort of recap and say for reporting periods, 12 past months, it can really be any past 12 months that they want to capture, just to indicate what those 12 months are in the app. Include the sub-consultants billings and include the direct reimbursables billings so we can underwrite those different exposures properly. And then we can move on to the next. This piece I feel is really key, and it does a couple things. It lets us know right away what type of firm that we're looking at, and it's also a place as a broker where this can really be somewhere that you add value back to your client. It allows you to sort of dig in and see exactly what types of services a firm might be providing. So if you have an architecture firm, it allows you to see, in addition to their architectural design services, if they're doing anything else along with that, where you might be able to sort of drill down and break out and see the different parts of their business and how their operations work. And from a premium perspective and an underwriting perspective, this sort of serves as a tool to see what our higher rated exposures are and what our lower rated exposures are. So the orange arrows are examples of some services that civil engineering firms might provide, architectural engineering firms might provide that are discounted. And it could be anywhere from like a 40% discount to a 70% discount off their base rate. So you would take like the base architectural rate and then discount that 70% approximately for some of these services. So it really does have an impact on the premium. So I just wanted to highlight a couple of them that come up a lot, and a lot of times the breakout isn't provided. So it might just say, we might get an app in the door that just has 100% architecture. And then if I go back and talk to the broker, it might be that, oh, they also do some interior design, or they do have some feasibility studies in there. And then when that breakout is provided, it can drop the premium significantly. So just to go through and make sure that everybody has the sort of an understanding of what these terms are, I can just go through the highlighted ones really quickly. Concept design would be like a model or a computer rendering tied to an architectural firm or a civil firm doing mechanical design, things like that. Construction management, that's usually two different categories: at-risk construction management and agency construction management, which is what we are focusing on here on this app, which would be where the insured is acting as the eyes and ears of the project owner, just making sure that the sub-consultants on the project are adhering to the plans. Environmental impact studies. This is sort of where, you know, at the initial choosing of the site and the project they want to build, someone might come in and look and see the area around it and evaluate how it might impact the environment. Feasibility studies. reports, opinions, master plans. I actually broke these definitions down on the slide following, but basically what they are opinions or studies offered before the project starts, before it leads to construction documents. So a feasibility study, I always look at as a way to say, is this project feasible, yes or no? And a project owner would hire an architectural firm to go in and look at a site, and the architect might say, oh yes, like your idea is possible, we can move forward with this idea, and they'd give them some sort of starting point, or they might look at it and say, no, actually this isn't an appropriate site. And the architectural firm or the civil firm charges a fee for that. So it's included in their billings, but no construction documents ever happen for it. So obviously that's a much lower rated exposure for us. Going on down for forensic investigations and testimony, a lot of times firms, maybe on the side, a principal or one of their employees might do investigations for an insurance company or something like that, and then they go back and report their findings if a fire occurred or something like that, and they even may testify in court. So that captures that service. Interior design, that's for structural and non-structural interior design. A lot of architectural firms provide that service as well. There's land surveying, landscape architecture, which speak to themselves, and then schematic design without construction documents is sort of like a step above the concept design. It's conceptual in nature, but it may provide some measurements or things of that nature. So overall, just to sort of regroup, these are sorts of things that, you know, when an app comes in to me initially, I take a look at it and I can tell right from the billings and right from the services section what program this belongs in, if it's a smaller firm, a middle-sized firm, a large firm, and the types of services they're providing. And then the next step really is to analyze what's here and to try and hone the premium and get, you know, the best rate, the best premium I can provide by looking at this breakdown and seeing what their exact exposures are. And for you on the broker side, it allows you to dig in to see what your clients are doing, provide a big picture of their services, and just very broadly, not just Victor, but A&E carriers in general are looking for this type of information. So it would always, you know, better serve the client to sort of have this on hand to help minimize the back and forth and to really get a good premium up front that would be competitive in the marketplace from us. And if you move on to the next slide, it just sort of recaps the definitions of feasibility studies, master plans, reports, and opinions. That's really a big one. Most firms do provide some services in this realm, and it covers a lot. So, you know, ask your clients, dig in, see if they do any of these things. If you have a question as to whether or not something is a study or not, you can always reach out to your underwriter. But this provides sort of a general overview of what each of those are. And then it also just shows the lower rated services, what they do and what the rate impact can be on a submission going out the door to you when you first take a look at it. And now Kevin's going to take over and go through the other portions of that app.
Thanks, Jeanine. And as we kind of reach the midway point of this conversation, a few of you have taken advantage of the chat feature that you have. So apologize for not mentioning that at the first time, but if you do have a question that comes up, feel free to use the chat feature to submit. We may not be able to get to every question asked, but we can follow up with answers from that. But a few of you have added a few questions. So, you know, I think that what Jeanine has highlighted is one of the more important pieces, because oftentimes like Jeanine, I know you've had the situation come up where you have a broker that has 2 architects or 2 civil engineers, essentially the same size and the same firm, and saying, hey, we do the same thing. Why is our premiums dramatically different? And what Jeanine just talked about really gives you some insight into how an underwriter views the exposure and how you can really differentiate on cost if the architect shows that they have a high level of interior design services, or if a civil engineer has a land surveying division versus somebody that's just doing full service civil engineering. You can get some dramatic changes in premium around that. A couple questions that did come up. One, I wanted to highlight, as we move to the fall, we're actually looking at some updates and revisions to this application. And so, there will be some updates highlighting some things that you as the brokerage community have said that you'd like to see tweaked or changed. So again, in the chat feature, feel free to update us on things that we may have been able to miss, but we'll be sharing that in the fall as we get closer to the end of the year. And then, Jeanine, there was one question just on direct reimbursables. Is there a maximum that you guys target to, or how do you look at direct reimbursables when they come in?
Generally, there is a rule about 10% direct reimbursables tends to be the norm. However, if there is a large amount in that direct reimbursables category, we'll generally go back to the broker and ask what that represents. Sometimes it could be subs, which would then mean we would need to include it. Sometimes it could represent FF&E or something like that for an architectural firm that may be providing furniture and different items through an interior design service. So it's not a firm 10%. If we take a look at that number and we decide that there's an amount in there that doesn't represent an exposure to us, then we can go above that 10%. But just as a general rule, when we're looking at it, we would cap the direct reimbursables at 10, but we would always go back and ask, what does this amount represent to make sure we're getting it right.
Great, thanks. So what I heard is that under 10% is pretty relative to the program and standard. But if you do have a prospect or account that shows direct reimbursables above roughly 10% of revenues, there very well could be a reason for it. As Jeanine said, projects located all over the country or internationally that's requiring additional travel or other things. So just use that as a key item, that if a prospect or a client presents you with that, just to get a little bit more information on what's driving the direct reimbursables, and you'll be able to allow the underwriter to see that and be able to provide the quote out of the gate. So thanks, Jeanine.
Sure.
Now let's transition to kind of the second piece is, separate from the exposure basis, the element is like, where does the client fit? Oftentimes when I'm talking to brokers, looking at websites or generic applications that come in, there are often some missing questions or things that, if highlighted or delineated more effectively, may allow you to move the client further down the line to figure out whether this is really a contractor or a design build exposure, or somebody with a high level of specialization that may be matched up on a specific rate basis in a more specific program. What I find in talking to brokers is the business information question off the applications really helps to drive at a high level some things that we see time and time again. So as you can see, there's questions around actual construction, installation, development of sale of computer hardware or software, subsidiary issues of whether or not you are owned by somebody else, somewhat on the acquisition, firm control, et cetera. What this does at a high level is allow us to delineate areas that we may have a separate program for, or that present unique exposures to the practice program that require some additional endorsements, exclusions, or framework around that. Highlighting that to the underwriter or presenting that more effectively to the market gets us farther down the line, so we know that first quote is something that's a long-term solution for the unique risk that claim handles. So for instance, if a firm answers yes to actual construction, installation, fabrication, over 20%, we have a companion contractors E&O program that can write this business on a very similar form, again, with some additional endorsements and exclusions to cater to the individual contractor risk, you'll notice 20% is used. And just as a guideline, if the firm's revenues related to construction or design build is under 20%, that's fairly de minimis to a practice exposure. So we can't assume firms that like to engage on a few projects that are taking both a design and construction responsibility or a construction responsibility on that. So we're really just looking for firms over 20% to be able to file that. So if a prospect comes in with that exposure, this is where we would cater more to a contractor's type of application. And a quick call to the underwriter, for that form is easy and quick to do. Some of the other areas here, as far as control, acquisition, et cetera, just helps us to get an understanding in the big circle of where the insurable interest is and how it's situated. We sometimes get applications from subsidiaries of larger corporations or situations where family members or related individuals own a multitude of companies that present some unique exposures. So the key here is to just have the conversation, because I always talk about the fact that we have to draw a big circle around all the related entities and look at it in combination as to the exposure that's presenting itself. And that's the case here. And then finally, I would just highlight real estate development, because we do see a strong overlay with firms that are getting more involved on the development side. We do have a separate real estate developers program for firms that are actually engaged in some of the financial, purchase or leasing of facilities. So it's just something to keep in mind. But this is an area that I think is a quick highlight for the broker, just to say if the answer is yes on any of these pieces, chances are there's an underlying question that's going to come back or some additional information that we may need to be able to get this information and the proposal to you as quickly as possible. The third and last piece that we wanted to highlight today is on risk management. So as you can see on the question here, we've got a risk management and loss prevention series of questions here. And I would say more often than not, the firm's internal risk management practices is probably one of the key differentiators that we see between firms that don't jump off the page from the standpoint of an exposure basis or the type of work that they're doing. How the firm is set up or operates in key areas has really been a long-time driver on our side of firms with better loss ratio and better claims management and really a better client over time. So as a broker, one way is to highlight if your client says no to any of these questions, it's an opportunity to engage them on conversation on why they don't or why they should consider it. Although not part of this webinar, our website and specifically our School of Risk Management on the risk management side has a multitude of advisories or information on these topics that helps to position the why of should the firm be involved in these areas and how we see it mitigated in potential claims or making it more defensible if a claim is made against your client. As we look more directly at this, what you'll see is some of the questions are deemed to be things that they're doing externally. So for instance, question 15, in the last year, did 50% of the firm's employees attend a risk management seminar or webinar? Or 50% of the employees completed one course within the risk management continuing education program, question 16. And then other things that talk about, use of written contracts, specify payment terms in their contracts, et cetera. So from one element, things that the clients are doing. Within the program that we have, if the firm's revenues are under $5 million and they come to us in the practice program for architects and engineers, we've delineated a 5% risk management credit that's available in some states, just specifically on proactive engagement and completion of a risk management continuing education course. For those that don't know, again, on our School of Risk Management, we've got 24/7 access to continuing education. So a natural link that clients of ours can go into our School of Risk Management, get a resource of tens of available webinars for continuing education and the ability to earn a premium credit on the subsequent application. Another component of the risk management credit, which is an additional 5%, are in areas of what the firm's doing in their contracts. So whether it's use of contracts, project definition document, payment terms, et cetera, that's shown there in question 17 through 23. If firms are showing yes in several of those areas, again, that may lead to a direct premium credit as well. So keys that I think brokers do very effectively. One is using it as a gauge of areas for improvement for the firm that may open up doors for communication with you and the client that their current broker or that they may not otherwise be aware of. And more importantly, these questions lead directly to risk management credits to the premium if the firm, again, is internally involved in several of these areas and potentially doing continuing education outside as well. There is a listing of states that are available on the risk management. So for instance, in the state of Florida, that credit is not yet available that credit is available, but there are several states that have not approved that filing again. So we can go ahead and take a note and circle back with folks to let you know the few states where that 10% credit's not available yet. That list is much smaller than the states that are available, but be happy to confirm that as well. That's a great question to be able to connect to around that. The only other thing that I would highlight that's not on here, the bonus information that I'd like to give you, is on the application, we do have a question around membership of associations, specifically American Institute of Architects, the National Society of Professional Engineers. With the exception of the state of Tennessee, every other state provides us the ability to do a learning credit for firms where 50% of their licensed principals are members of either AIA and SPE in combination. So for instance, if you've got an architectural firm and there's 3 licensed principals, if 2 or more of those are members of AIA, that can lead directly to a 5% premium credit. Again, these are for firms under $5 million. If you have an engineering firm, and again, more than 50% of the licensed principals there are members of NSPE, there's a 5% premium credit as well. So the question really comes down to, you as a generalist, you that are serving a community or maybe have an area of expertise in other areas, but looking for a niche market and an opportunity. This is a great class of business to write and focus on. I've been with the company now 32 years, and most of that time on the road talking with brokers and architects, engineers, and contractors alike. And they're just a wonderful group to be able to engage in. The proposition of value is ingrained within their business as well. And those that bring that high level of value tends to work very well with this group. So, just things to kind of take away and remind is, ability to drill down on a firm's revenue and services not only can save the client money, but really presents you as a more trusted advisor to make sure that how they are performing their services is best represented to the marketplace for the best options. Getting your client to the right program or dealing with some of these niche services that may not be a perfect fit for a mainline program, finding the business questions to be able to drill down on that early prior to submission saves a lot of time and effort and really shows value to the client. And again, just reiterating, risk management is a huge indicator of mitigating risk and helping your clients strengthen areas that they have as weaknesses, or making sure that you present that effectively, especially in a changing market where strong risk management sometimes becomes a differentiator of best market pricing versus more challenging prices. And again, your knowledge of what we shared a little bit on the risk management side, and again on the association participation, those are things that you can ask up front or make sure that those questions get answered, or also provide some context around that. Because again, obviously, we're kind of in that same position of you're trying to provide a balance of the best pricing for the best value that you can that you can get to your client. And I guess with that, there was just a couple of questions that I wanted to bring up here. So one is recognizing if you come in for new business and another carrier, or they're getting a webinar or risk management seminar through another location, yes, that firm should answer favorably. Those questions are not specifically directed to our proprietary information or providing that service, but more focused on the firm, having access to that particular piece as well. And then one final question was around for firms that sub out all of the architectural or engineering work, is that available for this program? That's probably in the application something that will come up that's unique around that. So for instance, if this firm was a construction firm that subs out architectural and engineering work, if you presented that on the application, that fits within our contractors, program. If this is a situation where it's a manufacturing firm or somebody in the public domain that has its in-house architects or engineers, that may not be a perfect fit for our program, but we can talk through it with you, because oftentimes the general liability or the package policy that you're purchasing for may have a carve out for specialized or limited professional services in those positions where those firms are employees of the company. The important part there is, if you've got something that's a little bit outside the norm, to go ahead and call the underwriter and have a conversation. So Jeanine, I just wanted to say thank you for your time. Thank you for everybody on the phone as well. Here is our email in case you have any questions, and you can always send to our general email as well. And we have, as we go through, go ahead and leave a message with the chat. Again, we'll collect some of the questions that we weren't able to get to today with the short 30 minutes that we have. But thanks again for your time. I appreciate you joining us on this fine Tuesday, and hope to engage and see your next opportunity soon. Thanks again.